You are about the biggest acts of regulation, the Sarbanes-Oxley Act of 2000.
In late 2001, people began to notice there were counting irregularities with a large publicly traded company. The company had a national reputation for consistency in both good times and bad, so it was considered a blue chip stock. The name of this company was Enron. Within weeks, the stock went from over $90 a share to being worthless. This occurred because the management team tried to cover up losses from the previous years by altering their financial statements. The deception that occurred gave the public a reality check, and in effect, investors started taking a look into the financial records of other large corporations. The Sarbanes-Oxley Act was introduced into Congress by U.S. Senator Paul Sarbanes of Maryland and U.S. Representative Michael Oxley of Ohio. Their intention was to create a law which would restore the faith of investors back into corporate America by imposing stricter standards on financial reporting. There would be an increase in the reliability of financial statements created by any given company. Let's take a deeper look at what the Sarbanes-Oxley Act includes. First, officers of the company are required to sign financial statements for accuracy. This holds them personally accountable for any misrepresented data. Second, an increased fine and or prison sentence was set for individuals who attempt to defraud investors or misrepresent actual figures. Third, the company must provide a description of its internal controls. This is an attempt to increase the confidence of the public in that organization, while allowing them to gain insight into the company's procedures. The company is responsible for hiring an independent accounting firm to come in and audit the accuracy of their financial reports. The financial reports are now required to have a section dedicated to the auditor's opinion as to the accuracy of the figures presented in their reports. The company is now mandated to report all off-balance sheet transactions on their reports. Finally, the Securities and Exchange Commission is given more power to look into companies that are suspected of wrongdoing. The SEC will now do random reviews of companies to ensure that they are complying with the Sarbanes-Oxley Act. The reports are then published and released to the public review. The SEC is a special division that is designated to work with Sarbanes-Oxley issues. This division is called the Public Company Accounting Oversight Board. This video helped to educate you in the world of Sarbanes-Oxley.
Well, thank you. It did. All right. So, if you had lost money in Enron or some of these other places, did you hear the types of things you wanted to hear in terms of the benefits of the law? Okay, so what do you guys have for benefits?
Increasing the reliability and accuracy.
reliability and accuracy. And how did that get done? The reliability and accuracy. So I want to think about the how. Like the regulation says, make your financial statements more reliable and more accurate. That's not what the law was. So how did that get done, Jacob?
Hiring auditors.
Okay, yeah, that was one of them. So hire an independent auditor, kind of what we talked about last time with the Arthur Anderson deal. Okay, what else?
They had to report off balance sheet.
Okay, so report off balance sheet transactions. So there was more rules on how they report things, right? The actual things that needed to be included in their financial statements.
Top executive liable for the report.
Okay, top execs were liable. And in what way? How did they have to pay if they did something wrong? Jail, yeah. So we had jail and fines, which before you were kind of protected by the corporation because it's the corporation making those decisions. So it's almost like, this isn't quite the same thing, but it's called piercing the corporate veil. The corporation makes those decisions, and so the most you can do is fine the corporation. Well, they kind of went deeper than that and said, hey, if there's top executives that were doing something wrong leading the way, then they might personally face some jail time, because you can't throw a corporation in jail, right? So that was different. That was an extra stick to throw into the mix. Was it this class that we talked carrots and sticks? I think it was my other class, but they asked, what does that mean? I think it was leadership, creativity, and change. You guys, I think, have a better grasp of carrot and stick. So, okay. Any other things that we didn't list?
Or giving the SEC more power to investigate.
Yeah, that was one. So SEC, more power. Now, what does that relate to then? More power to investigate. What does that likely mean? Just try to imagine how that would play out.
They think they're doing something wrong or kind of lying about numbers. Kind of come in up.
Yeah, they could come in, and so on a given day, they're going to ask for documents. They might be able to seize things, depending maybe on how big a deal it is. But they're going to be able to intrude on the business, maybe unannounced, depending on what types of power they're granted, and the company has to comply. Otherwise, there might be fines or jail, but likely it'd be fines at that point. So we kind of tilted more power to government or government authority with a lot of went on. Okay, so we had some bad stuff. We had some bad dudes doing some bad stuff with the Enron, WorldCom, all the stuff that they did. So the benefits probably resonate nicely. As econ students of various sorts, what do I want you to think about? Yeah, unintended and or direct costs. You're going to hear this the rest of your life. So remember that one of the things we think differently about in econ is we look at not only the benefits, marginal benefits if it's decision time, but the costs associated with those actions too. So doing a cost-benefit analysis. Well, that sounds great, but at what expense? So just to be really obnoxious about it, imagine that this particular new law or legislation caused half of the businesses to go out of business. Would that be a good policy change? No, right? But by focusing in on the benefits, if this is what's getting published in the news, that it's just the benefit side, we tend to over-regulate. We tend to have too much legislation by only focusing in on the benefits. And so politicians and the general public will tend to get overly focused on the benefits, especially when they've been harmed. It's nothing worse if you've been harmed by a big bad corporation, and like I said, they were big bad dudes that lied and committed fraud and all of that, we still have to be able to step back and think, all right, well, these are some benefits that will come out, reliability and accuracy of financial statements. At what expense is the next thing we need to really think about. Okay, so questions or comments there? So the next video I'm going to play is criticisms of Sarbanes-Oxley. It's coming from a fairly conservative guy, Newt Gingrich. And he is advocating to abolish Sarbanes-Oxley. And in this video, I want you to focus in on the cost. So let's see how it played out.
About the economy. I want to see steps taken to get the economy moving again.
This year, Congress has allocated
Let me get the volume up a little bit. Probably not too bad. I'm probably too high, so I'll apologize. I'll back it off.
$200 billion to get the economy moving, and yet all this spending has only slowed the rate of decline.
It is clear that Congress has to come up with new strategies and approaches to grow the economy once again.
There is one step Congress should take immediately, which would liberate American businesses, create jobs, and provide opportunities for these startups, and not cost the taxpayer a penny.
Congress should repeal Sarbanes-Oxley, which costs every small business $4,360,000 a year in compliance if it wants to become a public company.
$4,360,000 a year is massively bigger than the original Securities and Exchange Commission estimate that it would cost $91,000 a year for compliance. The government estimate was wrong by a factor of 4,000%.
This difference in cost can be a matter of life and death for small businesses.
One California venture capital firm told me that Sarbanes-Oxley has pushed new businesses back from a 5-year startup period to a 12-year startup period.
This costs money and jobs, and it discourages future entrepreneurs from starting their own businesses.
America's great strength has always been inventing the next generation of new companies and new jobs. America has always focused on growing the future rather than propping up the past.
Now Sarbanes-Oxley is destroying new job creation and new company growth at a time when we need it the most.
The effect of Sarbanes-Oxley in Silicon Valley has been especially dramatic. In the second quarter of 2008, there were no public offerings of venture capital-backed companies in Silicon Valley, a phenomenon not seen since 1978. In the third quarter, there was only one.
Sarbanes-Oxley has had a direct effect on venture capital. If it is not repealed, we will see Silicon Valley's status as a hotbed of innovation erode, and see more and more of our future outside of the United States.
Alex Pollock, a distinguished scholar at the American Enterprise Institute, has concluded that the total cost far outweigh the benefits, especially for smaller companies.
Mr. Pollock is not alone. Roberta Romano of Yale has concluded that Congress pieced together a series of reforms, resulting in provisions that were ill-conceived.
In fact, Ms. Romano is so unhappy with Sarbanes-Oxley that she recommends that the corporate governance provisions should be stripped of their mandatory force and rendered optional for registrants.
The experts have condemned the cost of Sarbanes-Oxley.
Business leaders, entrepreneurs, and venture capital investors have all condemned the cost of Sarbanes-Oxley.
The time has come to create more American jobs and grow more American companies by repealing Sarbanes-Oxley.
If you agree that Congress should act now to help the economy by repealing Sarbanes-Oxley, go to AmericanSolutions.com and sign our petition to Congress to help create jobs and repeal this bill.
Remember, the economy you are saving is yours.
All right, so cost. What did you guys come up with from there? Yep, Dave.
It costs $4,000,000 a year to comply with regulations versus $91,000 a year.
Yeah, that's kind of mind blowing, right? per year for compliance costs. Now, when we looked at it over here, we're like, yeah, they got to keep the books a little bit more, right? They got to potentially have SEC come in, and we got some sort of new rules for reporting some of their transactions. And so that there end up being real costs associated with implementing some of this to get more reliable, more accurate financial statements. And what was it estimated prior to passing the legislation? 91,000. Oh my gosh. You know, and I didn't check these numbers to see, you know, where they all came from, because that's just mind-boggling. But you can imagine that this pill was a little bit easier to swallow prior to passing the act. But how these laws and regs get, well, we learned a little bit of this with Alex's mom, Janet, right? Remember when she said a new law gets passed, and then they shovel it down to Janet's level at FDIC and say, implement this. They come up with rules and changes and things that real life people at real life banks need to actually do to accomplish what Congress passed with these kind of possibly one sentence or two sentence or paragraph type of thoughts on what the law is. And so that's where we start to get into being pretty difficult to estimate what that is. Okay, so that's a big dollar chunk. What other costs? That's one thing. These were for existing startups. Yeah, so the startup discouragement. And what does that cost? Jobs. So potentially jobs, current and otherwise, on getting started. It might discourage startups from happening at all, or it might keep them, as they said, a longer time frame from being able to get enough capital together to afford the 4.9 million or whatever it ends up being to get things started. Yeah.
I just had a question about the compliance cost. What exactly is that? Is just like paying the SEC or what?
No, it's usually internal costs that we have. It could be, there could be something maybe with SEC, but more than likely it's internal costs that we have. So one example would be, in order to handle the new regulations, I actually have to hire a new person. And that person is a fairly high-level attorney. It might be a person who practices law, or a high-level accountant, depending on the circumstances. So that one hire, just to handle this regulation, because it could be that thick, you know, $80,000 a year. So if you're a small business, or even a medium-sized business, you know, you just don't have $80,000 a year just lying around, and that's what they're talking about there. And then more than likely, the bigger the company, the more complex they are, then maybe they're hiring multiple people to do that. Modifications to their software. So they customized accounting software. And in order to report some of these new things that they need to report, they need to call in a web designer or a software engineer to redo their system. And then they have to retrain all of their 1,000 employees on the new system and the new way that they're doing things, right? So there's those sorts of internal costs that end up getting generated from legislation changes like that. Some may be more onerous than others, but this one apparently led to some serious costs. All right, so discourage startups, discourage jobs. Got something else to add in cost? I think kind of goes along with jobs maybe, but and the discourage startups. Yeah, Paige?
Could it be community growth, like just the general community?
Yeah, so economic growth of the community, of the nation in this case, but so yeah, definitely some communities might be hit harder. They mentioned Silicon Valley, right? So it might disproportionately hit some local communities more than others, but it could be economic growth nationwide even. Fewer jobs, fewer growth, less startups, less innovation. I mean, it has a lot of trickling down effects. So yeah. This stuff pretty easy to estimate at the front end of passing a new legislation. Is jobs and startups and economic growth, is that an easy thing to put a price tag to? No, very hard in fact. And this is where we start to really get the tension maybe between more conservative-minded people that want to just trust the market. Our economic theories teach us that the invisible hand is going to lead us to better economic growth and more startups and more innovation. And they might say, prove it, and it's like, wow, well, we can prove it to some degree. I mean, that's what some of the research papers do for us in looking at the number of startups and the impact that they have, but it's not very easy to put into action when somebody's been harmed by an economic downturn or an Enron or some sort of scandal. This is where politics starts to take over more than economics. The economics might be fairly clear with what we need to do, but when we have a small group of people, like the Enron people, for instance, large company, thousands of people affected, but relative to the population of the United States, drop of water in the bucket. But who's in the headlines? Well, it's the guy that's worked for Enron for 15 years that put everything into retirement, and now he's lost everything. He had $100,000. He was about to retire 2 years from now, and now he's lost everything. All of his retirement's gone. No retirement at all. And he's age 63. That's the person we're seeing in the headlines, right? That's the person then that is seen by, well, that could be my Uncle Joe just as easily as it was Joe Schmo, right? It could be my Uncle Joe. It could be my family that got implemented. Doggone it, government's got to get in there and pass some laws and police these people and monitor them a little bit better, right? All of a sudden it becomes very political rather than maybe rational in terms of what the impacts might be. And that's where politics and economics don't play nice with each other always. There's overlap between the two, but politics can start to take over. And the media and the politicians, they know that when they're playing politics. To me, that was playing to their own self-interest usually, not necessarily the public interest if they took a good, hard, rational look. But I don't know what the fraction is, but it's a pretty small fraction of politicians that have had Econ 101. Not real good. Even though they might be very smart people, but they don't have all of that. So, all right, questions or comments there? All right, well, let's see. I wanted to do one more little case study. This is on spinning, right out of your textbook. Well, it's another conflict of interest story here. Hey, just as if you got your notes that I had sent before, I'll put it up on the screen. I don't know if you'll be able to see it very good, but it's the Frank Quattrone. It's out of the book. All right, where did we leave off reading last time? Left off with you? All right, so Jordan, even though maybe you weren't even here, but we'll just go, what is there, 3 paragraphs? Or 2? Looks like 2. We'll come to Chisholm after. So Jordan starts off and go to Chisholm after as a paragraph.
Frank Quattrone of Credit Suisse First Boston was a highly regarded investment banker specializing in technology companies. But his reputation took a big hit in March 2003 when the National Association of Securities Dealers filed a complaint against him for improperly pressuring his analysts to provide favorable coverage in an effort to solicit customers for his firm. Allegedly, Quattrone linked his analysts' bonuses to their investment banking work and permitted executives of companies whose stock he handled to make changes in his staff's draft research reports.
NASD also accused Quattrone of spinning because he maintained more than 300 of Frank accounts for executives of technology companies that were active or prospective clients in the bank. These friends were allocated pot shares at his discretion. Spinning was not isolated to Patricia's firm. It was actually quite common on Wall Street. Solomon Smith Barney also allocated parts to get IPO shares to a number of executives, including Bernard Evers of WorldCom, Philip Anschutz, and Joe Nashio of Quest, Stephen Garfalo of Metro Media, and Clark of USA. The bank claimed that it issued shares to these executives because they were among the firm's individual customers and not because it wanted to persuade these executives to channel their company's investment banking business. Solomon Smith Barney. This claim was deemed dubious at best. The trend was convicted in 2004. The conviction was later overturned of obstructing the investigation into activities and was sentenced to 18 months.
Okay, so kind of playing favorites, right? So what is spinning? What are you doing when you're spinning? This is one of the terms from the chapter.
Isn't it probably like sell shares like at an IPO for like cheaper than they are to hire up executives and others?
Yeah, so yes, that's right. And you're not necessarily selling them cheaper, but you're giving them the first dibs on it. So the investment banker, Goldman Sachs or whatever, sets the initial public offering price. So Snapchat was our one the other day, right? And it started off at 17. Well, they get their buddies, they go down to the Friends of Frank, and they say, hey, we got an IPO, I think it's gonna be good. I'll get you in at the start. So they get that, like that initial throw them onto the market, they get those initial shares. And then if Snapchat runs up to, like it did, $24 a share, you know, they put $1 million into that or whatever, because we're talking about some fat cats here. And they kind of almost have a sure thing. Now, by the way, IPOs sometimes go down, so they're thinking that this one's gonna rock and roll, and they give it out to their buddies that are close. So kind of a cronyism type of, it's not what you know, but it's who you know, something that economists hate, that's not good economics. That's not a good way to handle, the market is not reflecting true values when we have stuff like that going on. Okay, so what was the conflict of interest in this case? Somebody other than Jordan.
It was had bonuses that were tied to their work.
Okay.
That gave them incentive to not be really accurate in their research.
Yeah, okay. And so what were they trying to get the companies that they gave, the executives that they gave the stuff out to, what were they trying to garner by giving them this gravy, by spinning out the IPOs to them? What were they trying to get?
Their investment banking.
Yeah, the future business that they would have of when they go to sell new bond, if there was a new bond issue from McLeod USA or whatever, Quest and what other stores. Yeah, you did good, by the way, on your names. You got that. You had the tough one. I don't even think McLeod's is big. The only reason I know that name is because it used to be the McLeod phone books. They took over Sprint. I think Sprint kind of merged with McLeod. McLeod's kind of an old name out there. So, with hopes that then they'll use their investment bank. Oh, they always scratch my back, I'll scratch theirs. And we go back to them. All right, so they got some jail time, if that's the case. Notice that the conviction was overturned, though, so this guy was still around as well. All right, I think that is it. Any questions on conflicts of interest? This is kind of more of a reading comprehension chapter, so if you have not read it, I suggest you do. And you've got the tests and stuff coming up, so I think that'll be it. All right, let's talk Allison next. By the way, next week we get into international stuff, so that'll be fun. So let me spin page around. Just out of curiosity, could you hear Jordan and Chisholm reading okay, Paige?
For the most part, it was pretty good. Not bad.
All right. So, chapter 11. Is that right? 11? Yeah. Oh, yeah, this is our accounting chapter. So, fair value accounting, mark to market. All right, anybody want to kick us off on 11? Is that true? You ready to go?
Yeah, I'm ready.
All right, go for it.
All right. So the second thing I wrote about actually was I wrote a book about fair value accounting, but is fair value and mark to market the same?
Yeah.
Okay, I didn't know that. That's kind of what I talked about in the second one.
Okay.
Because I talked about how they sounded the same, about how you leverage the cost like every certain period, like annually, semi-annually, whatever they decide.
Yep.
To the market. Then they talk about how that magnifies the swings in economic activity, or it over reports earnings and makes losses worse.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Let's add on from there.
On the very first bit, one of the three, the second sentence I thought was interesting, that points out when fair value accounting was enacted, it was only enacted 2 years before the financial crisis.
Yeah.
So in my mind, it's like, wow, this did take long for it to take effect, and really about the issue, but
Right.
at the same time, I thought it was missing. They also goes talking about that I experimented with it in the 30s.
Mm-hmm. Well, and prior to the crisis, the values were going up, right? So a lot of the valuations were going up, so it was working there. Chisholm?
Okay, since the values were going up, like I don't understand why they would want to like implement fair value accounting then, because like especially right after WorldCom and Enron and everything, where everything was like overstated. Like, why are you wanting to do that? You know what I mean?
Yeah. I think part of it is on their reserve requirements. So from a banking perspective, where this ties in is their ability to loan money out. If they're given the higher value of their assets, they have more than that they could be loaning out. So their leverage ratios get altered. But then that comes on the other end is what the problem was. Then we've got assets that crash in value, and now we have to have more capital infused into the business because you're not meeting your leverage ratios. And then the owners of the bank are saying, well, we don't have cash. And so that's where, but if we wrote out the ups and downs and did not have to do mark to market or fair value accounting, we'd be fine. We just hold it out. Our people are still paying their bond payment, or they're still making their payments. And so, and it was mortgage payments was the other part of that. Okay.
One thing I found interesting is you talked about the environment curve, like you, and it's like both fraud and honest mistakes by management. And in that video, they talked about the punishments for Sarbanes-Oxley. They were less severe if they did it on accident, it looked like. If they did intentionally, like 5 million instead of 1 million.
Right.
So it's kind of hard to tell. And of course, they're going to say, I mean, do I mean.
Right. Yep. And a whoopsie. Yeah, Josh.
I'll write about that. It's always said the problem with fair value accounting is that it requires numerous estimates of future economic events and leaves a great deal of room for honest errors and intentional misjudgments.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, especially when the market's swinging. It's one thing if the market's fairly consistent. In a stable market, it might make sense, but not when we have large swings, is where we start to run into the problems. Okay, other things you mentioned?
Okay.
Okay.
You said about the swings there, it said fair value accounting magnifies the swings in the economy. Over-reporting earnings in good times and exaggerating losses in difficult economic environment. Understanding earnings and undervaluing assets leads to as many bad decisions as overstating earnings or undervaluing assets.
Yeah.
It said that it was causing big problems because people in the market weren't able to get checks of information. They kept making them make bad decisions.
Yeah. So the pricing system gets distorted. Yeah, the magnifying concept, prices are going up. If we mark our increasing assets to their value, it allows me to even loan more money out, right? And so that's that magnification effect. Yeah.
I thought you brought up an interesting point on page 112. It's talking about the complexity of the fair value accounting. It says very bright individuals who develop and manage this extraordinary complex accounting system could be put to far more complex systems.
Yeah.
So, like,
yep.
Because of the system, how complex it is.
Yeah.
Otherwise, be doing productive things for society.
Yeah, I think that's a super important insight. Yeah, that very similar to the fair tax. Most of you had me for macro when we did the fair tax thing. That we've got, if we eliminated the income tax, we'd have all these accountants, all these attorneys, all these super high-level people that would be put into other things besides looking for loopholes and tax code changes, right? That you'd have a lot of smart people put to productive work. So it's kind of similar to that argument here. All right.
I thought on that point when he related it to how he has 40 years of banking experience, he doesn't understand the financial statements in America.
Yeah.
And then he talks about how they have complex business, but it's nothing compared to how complex their accounting system is, and he doesn't even think they necessarily understand what that all means.
Yeah, that's
like, what's the point if you don't know what all this means?
Right. That's a scary statement. And that's, again, similar to the tax code, too, that you kind of shake your head and your accountant goes through stuff, and yeah, it's amazingly complex. But to have a guy of his experience in the banking at the highest level to make that comment is a bit shocking.
Okay, so like, how do you catch them if you don't even know what for? If you don't
Exactly. How can there be a government oversight that would be able to catch something? Whereas on the inside, you've got every incentive to maybe look for those loopholes or find those maneuvers. You're going to be doing that a lot quicker than the government's going to be catching you on something, because you have a better incentive to find that. All right, other comments on this one? We're about to the end. We'll move on to the next one after this.
Well, I thought he made an interesting statement. Accounting system should never drive economic activity. They should reflect it. That's on page 106.
Uh-huh.
And I kind of related that back to my post, which was talking about going concerns and how that went against the fair value accounting system, and it caused public companies to not purchase assets because of the liquidity problem.
Right. Right. That it stifles that type of activity. And kind of playing off of that, I had circled at the bottom of page 117, and I think Professor Wagner believes this too. He said, however, I think the accounting systems that would evolve would be principle-based, less complex, and focused on essentials, and would have a clear connection between operating cash flows and accounting profits. And so I think Lynn believes that too, that we've developed, once you get into a rules-based approach, you're just always piling rule on top of rule. Oh, about this exception. Oh, well, we got to make a rule for that. Well, what about if this person does it this way because of these circumstances? Oh, well, we'll make a rule for that. And then rule to rule to rule. And that's how these legalese and the tax code and all of that gets extremely complex. Whereas a principles-based approach means that you're really just being practical given the circumstances. And it used to be a principles-based approach what was that, 1935, he said. And as the elites started to think they can think through rules better, the rule system tended to dominate. And now that gives us the mess we've got today. Okay, how about chapter 12? Derivatives and shadow banking. Oh, we didn't do 12 yet? Oh, I thought we did do 12, okay. So that's why everybody's looking, oops, I didn't do it, did you? So we did do 10, I was saying, did we get to doing, so did we do 10? Oh yeah, Fannie and Freddie, we did that one, right? Yeah, and I had it down that we did 10, okay. So it's just 10, 11, okay, so now we're on to 12, all right. Well, maybe we'll cut class a little early, so. Yeah, you guys are getting life easy. I was gonna try to sneak in the 12. 12 kind of plays nicely from our chapter, last chapter with derivatives and shadow banking. All right, so since we have a minute, did anybody have I should have maybe extended a little last burning thing, or now that I've got you going on getting out of here, you're done, or last burning comment on? All right, we'll call it a day.
So we're going to do the next chapter for next class?
Yeah, so yeah, definitely 12. Actually, yeah, let's see. I'm getting confused between this class and the other class. I think I was going to do 12 and, well, no, you got the test. Just 12 is fine, just 12. Nice and easy, yeah. Well, like I said, this one's more reading comprehension, so I think it really is a little bit, I mean, there's details on it, because you got the Sarbanes-Oxley and... Oh my gosh, they're diverse. Sure.
What's your, no, that's just you get. Yeah. There be.
That's one of the things. How important
I think we covered Dodd-Frank, Sarbanes-Oxley, Tax Act.
All right, Josh, can we start talking, or do you need to be in front of your stuff to talk?
Do that. It's just about this. We'll keep. Because obviously I had my question. I was going to do the smoking one. I keep like looking at my sources and stuff. Because for the.
So do you have the things?
At the moment, every time I open this up, I look at it, and then I confuse myself, and then I stress myself out, and I stop.
Okay.
So I thought I've got to come and speak to you, but I'm just going to.
Yeah, no, that's good. We'll get you going. I want you to be working on it this weekend. So.
Well, I want to get it done as soon as possible. Right? I want to get it in before this deadline.
Yeah, everybody should be working on running their regressions right now. So.
Yeah, stuff like that, running regressions and stuff, that's tripped me out. I don't really understand what I'm doing for that.
have you have you done the exercises with the Excel and you know how to run the regression? I mean, you've actually done it, I hope, with the, okay.
I've done the Excel one, but that was sort of my, with that,
You did the car exercise?
I've not done the car exercise, no.
Oh, I was hoping you'd have that done.
I only just, but I stopped looking at the things, I thought, well, we're done now then. They was just talking about it before you came in, they said about,